It only seemed like yesterday that Destiny 1 released in 2014. We, of course, woke up in the Cosmodrome as these new quote unquote light bearers used the powers of the light, the Traveler, to use against the darkness. We didn't really know a lot about this universe, unless you were, of course, a lore nerd, which you were reading or listening to my videos at 2 o'clock in the morning since the beginning of time. But we just woke our eyes up in this new universe, and we really didn't predict what was going to happen yet. And again, I believe, a majority of the community back in 2014 didn't have too much of huge expectations. Of course, Destiny 1 release was not good, but we delve our hands into it, and we started to enjoy this game and what Bungie was providing with us. Of course, it wasn't eventually a bit changed, or was eventually changed, as Activision departed from Bungie Studios, and of course that also triggered a whole other effect. And then eventually, after the year of that change, we of course got a huge pandemic, which definitely affected how Beyond Light and Year 4 was structured, as well as the Witch Queen that was developed and later released to us in 2022. But yet again, Witch Queen has been proven to be one of the best expansions Destiny has up to date. So yet again, there's a lot of huge blocks and mountains, I like to call it, in the Destiny 2 universe that can always happen. However, we always seem to prevail through it. But I wanted to talk about a problem that I wanted to address, and stuff that I think needs to be addressed, as there's been a lot of recent videos on the population decline. There's been videos on how things have been developed and looked at from Bungie, and of course the developers since back in Season of the Haunted, and of course through Season of the Plunder, and how this will all go into, of course, the next big expansion being Destiny 2 Lightfall. And I know a lot of people are thinking a bit differently than we were a couple months back. I have talked to a lot of people recently who have refunded their Lightfall editions, as they believe that Bungie is not listening to what they're saying, feels like the core game activities is just not changed, how things have been addressed, how expansions and still older, younger content, even though they're going to stop sunsetting content going forward, still from year 1 and year 2, content is gone in the game, which makes it harder for new players to get into the game, making the population not see an increase in new players. And it really affects everything in that type of population level, in terms of how Destiny is reacting to that. But more specifically, I wanted to really delve my hands into what I believe is Phase 3 of Destiny 2. Now, of course, there is, how Marvel does it, like where they develop their movies, and of course, their pinnacle of each phase, and then they block it into a phase like that. That's pretty much how they do it. With Phase 1 in Marvel, if you watch any Marvel movies, you know that the beginning of the first phase was Iron Man, and of course ended with the Avengers. And then, of course, that also continued through Iron Man 3, all the way to Ant-Man in Phase 2, and then, of course, Doctor Strange, Civil War, into, of course, Far From Home and Endgame. And, of course, there is a Phase 4 that's going on right now, which I, again, don't want to talk about it, but is suffering some kind of continuity type things. But again, it's not a Marvel video, it's a Destiny video, so we're not going to get our hands into that. I really wanted to talk about Destiny in particular. Of course, right now, I believe we're in Phase 3. Of course, Phase 1 of Destiny, as I like to call it, was, of course, Destiny 1, Taken King, and Rise of Iron. Then following along from that, in Phase 2, we of course got Destiny 2's release, Forsaken, and of course from Forsaken to Shadowkeep, we got a huge change of how Activision was going to depart from the studios, and that also, Shadowkeep would be in Phase 2, and then now in Phase 3 would be Beyond Light, Witch Queen, the upcoming expansion Lightfall, and eventually Final Shape concluding the phase. So you understand that we're probably in one of the longest phases out there, as Witch Queen was delayed, and we're not going to get Final Shape till 2024. So we're in a very long type, year phase here with, of course, the Dark and Light Saga. Of course, after the Final Shape, the saga will be over, so then we can go back and really look at each expansion separately and how it affected the Destiny 2 Light Saga in 2024, but we're not in 2024, we're in 2022. So I really wanted to branch into how the upcoming and recent two expansions have been, bringing to the game, and how it's been, affecting the game overall. Of course, there's been a lot of issues since Beyond Light released, and of course, those issues have been resolved. However, the side effect from those issues that first initially brought into the game has still been there, and how it has still affected the audience, the population that we've been playing with for such a long time, that has eventually left the game and stopped playing it. So, to start off, there's a lot of things that happened in 2020. Beyond Light was a huge and crazy year for all of us. As you didn't know, there was a huge pandemic that, of course, went into our lives, but more importantly, into the gaming industry. We, of course, saw the first expansion that really, in my mind, that was a major expansion go flat on the stove. Of course, with Shadowkeep it was a bad expansion, but of course it still had a developed strategy for how they were bringing along with it, and it of course had a lot more weapons and a lot of more things than Beyond Light, because I believe Beyond Light brought like 11 or 12 weapons, and of course it was not a great expansion. Of course, Beyond Light brought around sunsetting and of course getting rid of expansions, so the content that you previously bought, like Red War and the first two mini expansions, Curse of Osiris and Warmind, would be eventually depleted from the game and removed forever, and you wouldn't get your money back at all. Now this, of course, brought a huge other long effect of how players were reacting to this, of how money spent on the game, guns and weapons that were spent, would be, of course, sunsetted, so you wouldn't be able to use it in the activities that you wanted to do in the future. And of course, the activities that you of course bought, you wouldn't be able to play anymore. So this brought a huge long-term effect. Eventually, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, whenever you want to, 2022 is just a long-ass year, we of course got the reveal of Lightfall that said they weren't going to sunset any more content, which was a huge change, and I'm glad they did that, and I'm glad that they were removing it, because of course the game is just sometimes way too big, and now I feel like they're finally getting back on their feet. However, it still doesn't change the side effect of getting rid of all the year 1 and year 2 type content. This is a big issue, as if new players wanted to join into the game, a lot of the content, like the Red War and Forsaken campaigns, are not there. So it hurts the new player experience, and also hurts the veteran players who really wanted to play that content again. If you wanted to play Red War or of course Forsaken, you would of course have to go on Destiny and look at cutscenes or people playing it from years ago. So you understand there's a lot of FOMO, there's a lot of that type of effect there when it comes to old content still being gone. The side effect is still carried on today, and if you made a complaint video about Destiny, which is not what I'm doing by the way, I'm just talking about it, you would of course say that still the removal of those type of content really hurts the game, and it hurts the, again, population of new players who want to join into the game, as they could be feared that their content that they buy could be removed eventually later on in the future. And still, free destinations, of course, now that Destiny is now considered to be free in some areas, they are in any right Bungie to delete or get rid of some content. I think they made like an interview a year ago saying that Nessus won't be gone for now, so you could always get that fear of, oh, what if Nessus is removed by next year? So you understand that fear of losing content is a huge issue, and of course I hope that we don't see any significant backlashes or changes to that, and where Bungie removes a lot of content later on, but I feel like they should just, start something fresh and just not get rid of content going forward. And of course, it probably will happen. However, I feel like expansional content has to have some type of, I'm not saying, of course, oh, you have to keep every single expansion, which I would love. Of course, games change and evolve. However, I feel like that expansion content that you buy should have some type of, protection type status in a sense. I know there was like this idea back then that keeping content from old, expansion stuff should have like a download, and you should be able to download it. However, that would make, of course, console players, wouldn't be able to download it, as, of course, they wouldn't handle the storage of Destiny, and only PC players would be able to use it. But there should be some type of, like, resolve factor to, losing content and hopefully bringing that content back into the game as you, of course, bought it and those were the things you loved doing. And now with it gone, it really hurts the status quo of Destiny. Of course, sunsetting was also a major issue. However, that has now been resolved, and not entirely. There's still some side effects there and there about it, but I feel like they are eventually, starting to change that type of problem and issue to the other way around. Now, the other big issue I really wanted to go into that started with Beyond Light, going through Witch Queen, and now it's really been affecting, Lightfall, and of course, probably will in Final Shape, is, of course, the core activities. The core activities have been suffering for such a long time. However, with, of course, the Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Destiny and Destiny 2, I always think that it wasn't as affected as it is now. As with sunsetting and removal of content, a lot of strikes, crucible maps, stuff like that has been removed from the game. So it really hurts, the core activities, the activities that are probably required for exotics or required for things to do, events. Of course, a week ago, or this week, or whatever you want to call it, we had the Festival of Loss event, which basically told you to go and do like 35 strikes in one of the seasonal challenges. And with no new strikes in seasons, and basically only 2 to 3 strikes a year, it really can break down the mental space of a person or an individual like myself. The loss of strikes, the loss of crucible maps, the loss of gambit stuff, and of course the effect of not getting any new things for those activities, not knowing what will be brought in the next couple of seasons to those core activities, and of course the changes that are brought along with it won't help, of course, the gameplay factor of that activity, and eventually it just leads to the player leaving the game or not playing that activity whatsoever, losing the population of it, and of course just a lot more backlash on Twitter of that activity. This is basically Crucible in a nutshell, but you get the point. We don't know what we're going to get for strikes, crucible maps, and of course gambit maps going into Lightfall. We don't have a plan. We don't have a map, a roadmap basically to what we're going to get. We don't have a roadmap of how much strikes and crucible maps we are going to get in Lightfall. We only had like 2 strikes in Witch Queen. Despite the success of Witch Queen, it was a huge down, big bad thing to have only 2 strikes in a huge major expansion. I feel like the Wellspring should have been replaced with more strikes than just having a 6-match player-made activity, as those things really don't go well in my mind. But besides that, I feel like the lack of strikes, the lack of crucible maps, the lack of gambit maps, and of course the lack of changes that are really helping those core activities is really derailing, of course, the audience, the population of Destiny. A lot of people can maybe agree with me with that factor, because I feel like without the amount of, those core activities that you're required to do, it can hurt. I feel like if Destiny needs to start branching out more with, of course, their, activities, with the exotics, with the quests they bring to other type of activities. I have not seen a quest in the last couple of weeks asking me to go and do a public event for an exotic. And yet public events were content that, of course, Bungie made, and that Bungie has not proven to do anything with for the last 3 years. And has only told us to keep doing crucible maps, to keep doing gambit matches. Why? It really needs to be changed. The core activities are the ones getting the more, in terms of importance. I don't really know because I'm not a Bungie developer, but has been targeted for all these activities that we're required to go and do if we want to go do them. But they're telling us to go do activities that are so stale. That's a huge problem in my mind, and I feel like Phase 4, since Beyond Light, since that drastic decision to remove content, and of course with the lack of it in Witch Queen, it really has affected the audience, and I feel like we are now seeing that side effect of it start to come short. Season of the Plunder, Season of the Risen, and Season of the Haunted has been chosen, or has been, shown to be seasons of burnout. Me, importantly, I would also talk about how I don't have anything from Risen at all done. I don't play any of these, 6-match made activities, these PsyOps battlegrounds. I don't play any of this stuff. So you understand, because I'm so burnt out in the game. I don't feel like there's point in doing it, and I feel like wasting hours of my time just for a seal with no huge reward to come out of it really is just not something I want to do, because again, I don't feel like I'm getting a real reward out of it, and of course I feel like the content is stale. What would you rather want? Would you rather want more strikes or crucible maps, or another stale 6-match made activity that you're not going to do? Of course, it's probably easier for Bungie to make a 6-match made activity than to do another strike, and of course, there's all that type of discussion we could always get into. However, you see the point where it's like it's not really what the audience wants. However, Bungie is doing it anyway. There's a lot of problems with Destiny. There's a lot of problems with everything in video games. You could also make, like, a lot of people could, point out problems in Elden Ring, or point out problems in God of War, or point out problems in Cyberpunk. I know a lot of people have problems about Cyberpunk. And, of course, eventually the game becomes really good, but then there's still problems. I know No Man's Sky suffered a huge amount of backlash, but nowadays it's not as bad as it was at launch, and it's actually a nice game to get into. You understand that when it comes to, of course, the game, you need to have that foundation be the one that's getting the most, involvement, most attention needed, of course, before you do anything with the side activities, the side quests, all that type of other things. I feel like the core activities is the main part of the game, because everything in the game is really requiring you to go do so. Think of things. Materials, what are you going to go do? Oh, the core activities, Nightfall, stuff like that, to go and get them, to eventually buy exotics out of the exotic archive, or to trade materials, or to buy things. So you understand there that you have to go do core activities. If you want to get exotics, of course, there's lost sectors that you would do for exotic armor pieces. However, if you wanted to get ascendant shards, or get maybe Nightfall weapons or exclusive weapons, or grind for the ritual seasonal weapon each season, you're gonna go do core activities. You know what I mean? Of course, raids is an amazing factor to the game, and I don't really want to get into raids because I feel like it's not as a problem as anything else. I feel like the LFG Finder will really help out having players find communities to play the raids with. So I really haven't been talking about it. If you know, that's how really I don't talk about things that have already been resolved. But I feel like those, from now until when that LFG Finder comes into place, it's going to be hard for new players to get into raids, because it's hard for people to, of course, go on the Bungie.net website, or to go to Discord servers to find people to eventually get people to join up in, and join up in eventually if they don't want to teach, or if they don't want to help out a person. And it's just a whole hard, huge mess when it comes to that. But when, of course, that LFG Finder in the game comes out, or if they, just that overall, I feel like that's going to really help out the new player experience for activities going forward. But that's not what I really wanted to talk about. Morally, I wanted to talk about how that with the game, there's a lot of issues going with the core activities. I feel like we need to have a plan of action to know what activities are really stuff that people want to delve our hands into. Because for me personally, I want to do Lost Sectors more than I want to do Gambit. That's just my opinion, because I never liked Gambit. And I don't want changes and core activities being made to Gambit for the next 2 years, even though I won't play Gambit at all. For a whole season, I think I played like 3 Gambit games. And I think this season I haven't played Gambit yet at all. So you understand that the community needs to have a say in what is actually, like, I feel like Bungie has insights on this, but they should really analyze what people are actually playing in the game, and then after all, eventually after that, people have to find out what really is what they want to do. I feel like a quest, or an exotic, type mission or something like that should have a sense of what the community would like to do, so then you would go and do it. If that makes not a lot of sense to you, just think of it as this way. If a quest is telling you to go and do 13 Crucible maps, but it also tells you to go and do 13 public events, which one are you going to do? Of course, when it comes to the PvE aspect of players, they're going to pick the public events. And it gives that kind of variety to a player, because they can do the things that they want to do to get the same exotic weapon, similar to how a person who plays 13 PvP private matches will go and do. So you see that both of them are receiving the same reward, but they're both doing different activities because they're doing it of their likes and what of their maybe dislikes are. if it comes to Crucible or public events. It's up to you. You see, though, that when it comes to Destiny, there's a huge problem with the core activities, and you can see that there's a huge problem with, of course, the foundation of the game that it's been built on over the last couple of years. And with that foundation not having a lot of changes for the next couple of years, of course, now that after Final Shape won't be the end of Destiny, but just of the saga, you'll see that we're probably going to have more expansions in Destiny 2. The foundation, the core activity of the game, has to be changed so significantly, has to have some type of, balance in what I actually want to do, and why I'm being so forced to go and do an activity. The last thing I want is to be forced to do something I don't want to do. It's a game, it's not work. I want to do the things that I want to do. But I don't want to be resulted in doing 30 strikes because I have to do it before a seasonal challenge for an event seal that won't get me any reward in the greater end. It will just get me a name tag that no one will pay any recognition or time to and be like, wow, that guy's actually pretty good. You could easily go and do a raid seal and, of course, go and do it, and people will give you more recognition than getting the Ghost Rider or the Flamekeeper event seal from Festival of Lost or Solstice of Heroes. So you understand that type of moment there. I feel like Bungie should really start looking at what activities really need to be changed and really should be taken out of the game so they can work on it later on. I feel like if you look at it this way, Trials of the Nine was such a horrible activity in year 1 of Destiny 2. They took it out of the game, and for like 2 to 3 years, they brought Trials of Osiris. And of course, it had a lot of mistakes at launch during, of course, year 3 and year 4, but eventually they put a lot of change, a lot of time into it, and they made it a better activity. Of course, there's still maybe some problems with it, but it's not as bad as it used to be. Gambit has to be taken out of the game, as an example, as a lot of players that I've talked to really don't like Gambit. It should be taken out of the game, and it should be focused on with a lot of more time, and be actually focused in making it a better experience. And of course, the loot that's provided and the reward that we're going to get out of doing an activity needs to be so significantly changed as well. You want to go grind 8 hours for a seal that no one's going to pay any attempt or attention to? Or would you go and try to do a raid for 8 hours to get a raid exotic that actually will make, your DPS strats and greater activities a lot more powerful? Would you go grind for Outbreak, or would you go grind for a seal? Answer that question. Now, see now that you really need to start making the, reward factor into the games much more better. That's how I would like to describe it. I feel like they really need to start thinking about how much time we're plugged into strikes and Crucible maps and how much rewards we get out of it. If we spend 8 hours doing strikes and we get nothing out of it, then there's a huge significant problem, and they should be really taking a look at all of that. Now, that is something I think they really should look at, because that affects every corner aspect of this game, as it's something that you're always doing is getting loot and grinding for it. To see that the reward structure is so not that great, it's going to affect how players look at an activity. It's going to affect, is this activity fun, or is this activity going to just do it and give me shit loot? Let's talk about it. So you know what I mean? Like, that's how it is. That's how I would look at it. That's how many of people might look at it. So you understand, it's not about the experience. It's about how much loot you're going to get out of it. And then after then, if it's not a good enough loot in the game, then that player is probably going to go do something else that's not as fun, but only because of the loot and the reward structure. So with the loot and reward structure problem that has been really happening, it's been happening for a while, you could say, but really I feel like Beyond Light Shadowkeep was the start of this, because I feel like a lot of the activities added are from seasonal seasons that are sometimes really good, however, are gone because they remove every yearly seasonal season every other year, so you won't be able to see it if you're missing out on Destiny during that time. So you see, there's stuff like that. Moreover, in a seasonal huge expansion, like Shadowkeep or Beyond Light, and there's an activity that's brought into it, there's not enough, or the loot is just not powerful enough to be considered, oh my god, that's something I really want to go grind for, so therefore, hence, I'm not going to go grind for it. So already there you can see that activities, that the reward structure, that the core activities in particular are really being the ones being suffered, and that really hurts on everything, as every expansion is going to ask you to go and do those core activities, to go and grind for loot. And of course, if the loot's not good enough, then you're not going to look at the activity for the experience, you're going to look for it for the rewards, and if the rewards aren't good, then you're not going to have a good time, and then it results in you not doing the activity. With all these problems in play, a lot of people can just say that this game is just not worth it. And of course, the money that you have to spend on it, I know we just had a Destiny 2 free week, which made Shadowkeep, Beyond Light, and Witch Queen all free. However, the money that's spent on the game, like how Lightfall is like $40 to $50, and with, of course, the seasonal content that you have to buy, and with the dungeon key that a lot of people are probably buying, the deluxe editions that people are probably buying for the bonuses of Lightfall, it just comes down to being so much money for a normal person to pay for a game. It just sounds like a business plan, or like an Adobe Premium plan, or buying Skyrim. It just seems like you're playing and buying so much for content that you're later just not going to enjoy if you don't like something. If you don't like Crucible, then of course, you're going to get some things maybe in an expansion of Crucible maps, even though expansions don't have Crucible maps. But for an example, if an expansion brings Crucible maps and you buy the expansion, you're not going to play Crucible, so already you're not going to use any of the money just spent on something that you're not going to do. It's stupid if you don't like strikes, but you're spending money to get new strikes, but yet again, sorry if I said again, but you're buying, you know what I mean. You're using your money, you're buying an expansion. However, some of the activities in that expansion you might not like, but you're just wasting your money at that point. And it comes down to using your money for things you're not going to play. I bought the Vow of the Disciple raid because I bought Witch Queen's Deluxe Edition. However, I have like 5 clears. I don't have any of the raid weapons. You see that? You see how it's a bit tricky for me to enjoy Vow if I'm not playing it because I just don't like it. I already feel like I waste my money. And that's something I don't really say often as a Destiny 2 YouTuber. I don't want to say I waste my money. However, if I'm buying content and then not going along with doing it after years and years, it just makes me feel like I wasted it. I bought the Festival Loss event card, but I didn't grind at all in the Festival Loss event. So already there, it was a waste of money for me, because of course I bought the event card on the final day of Festival Loss because I had a lot of shit going on. So already, in conclusion, there's too much issues with the core activities. There's way too much issue. There's a lot of issues with how much a player can get a reward out of something. So it really affects the activity overall, and it affects the experience. And then, of course, there's an issue with how much money a person has to spend if they want to become a new player. And with the issue of the activities that has been earlier on been sunset and removed from the game, and now you don't have those activities, it's harder for a new player to get into the game, and that makes it so the population could not, of course, increase as Bungie is initially wanting to. So it really, again, later on hurts the population. It hurts getting new players, your friends, to join into the game, and that really just sucks overall. Now, that's a lot in this video. I know this video is like 28 minutes long. I know that was a big video, but I really just wanted to talk about how much stuff is going on with Destiny, and really a problem I've been seeing since Beyond Light. Of course, the goal I really wanted to have is to really look at these problems and hope Bungie starts addressing them way more often than not, so Bungie can have a better future when it comes to, what I call Destiny Phase 3 with Lightfall and the Final Shape. We only have 2 more expansions, guys. I really want this next whole year to be really good for Destiny, and I hope, of course, you would love to have the same goal as me, where Destiny should just start addressing these problems, start fixing them, and of course make Destiny a much better game than it is right now. Of course, I'm not saying that it wasn't bad. Of course, there's a lot of good things that happened. Witch Queen was one of the best expansions, and of course there's been a lot of things going on since then that have really just shown that Destiny is not going to be a game that just ends like Outriders. No offense, Outriders players, but you get the point. I don't feel like the game will die. I feel like the game will continue evolving and learning from its mistakes. It's just coming along to if Bungie are going to listen to those mistakes, and then of course if what Bungie addresses, how Bungie addresses the mistakes, is one of the big problems that I see, and hopefully we'll find more of an answer later on down the road, and hopefully the way it's reacted and addressed to will make, of course, the game much better. But that's all for me in this video. Hope you guys enjoy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.